Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. I am your teacher Alia Batul with lecture number 7. In the previous lecture हमने database languages को देखा and data dictionary को काफ़ी अच्छे से देखा, इसकी types को देखा. Today's lecture is the entity relationship model. Let's see today's review entity relationship model. Students, today we are going to study the ER diagram, or by listening this lecture you will get the essential knowledge and skills about ER diagrams and database design, because the lecture topic is entity relationship model, and in this lecture we will discuss entity relationship model and ER models, entity relationship diagrams. I think you will learn things like what is ERD, why ERD, and ERD elements or components, and how to draw this ERD. And next we will see what is an ER diagram. Before we starting this slide number 1, first of all, what is an entity relationship diagram? Like, this is also known as ERD or ER diagram or ER model. This is a type of structural diagram for use in database design. An ERD contains different symbols and connectors that visualize two important information. One, the major entities within the system scope, and the interrelationship among these entities. So student, हम इसमें different entities and इनका relations जो है वो देखेंगे. Before starting this lecture, मैं एक दफ़ा फिर आपको थोड़ा सा entity relationship model का जो आपने पहले previous lecture में देखा था, एक view देना चाहूँगी कि entity relationship model is a logical representation of data. It views the entire system as a collection of entities related to one another, and it is used to describe the elements of a system and their relationship. This entity relationship model is introduced by Peterson in 1976. And students, this model represents the conceptual of a database along with its entities and relationships in an easy way. So let's see what is an entity, a real world object distinguishable from other objects. An entity is described in database using a set of attributes. You can say an entity is a person, place, thing or event. Like आपने practical life में noun का word सुना है, but you are in databases, and so you can say an entity is a person, place, thing or event for which data is collected and maintained. For example, a library system. Library system may contain data about different entities like book and member, and a college system may include entities like student, teacher and class. An entity, students, is represented by a rectangle like employees. ये सामने आपको एक diagram साथ साथ show हो रही है. Employees, the name of the entity is written inside the rectangle, and the entity is used in different ways like entity type or entity sets or entity instances. So let's see what is entity set. A collection of similar entities like all employees. This is called entity set. Set of all entities of a particular entity type in the database at a given point of time is called an entity set. For example, an entity set student may consist of all students in the university. Another entity set teacher may consist of all teachers in the university. So, like these examples, all entities in an entity set have the same set of attributes. Each entity set has a key and domain. Key and domain को हम next में देखते हैं. Next, you can see relationship. अभी हमने बात की थी कि relationship क्या होगा. Actually, relationship is a logical connection between different entities. The entities that participate in a relationship is called participant, and that relationship may be between different entities or between an entity and itself. A relationship is established on the basis of interaction among these entities. For example, a relationship exists between a student and teacher because the teacher teaches the student. Like look at this collection of similar relationships and or association among two or more entities. Like ये आप देख सकते हैं कि इसमें डायग्राम में employees and departments has a relation, like employees works in department. Like employee name is Alia, works in pharmacy department. This is a pharmacy pharmacy project or database. So employees works in department. This is the relation in diamond symbol. Relationship set collection of similar relationships. Similar relationships जैसे अभी हमने देखा कि जो relationship आपको इसमें शो हो रहा है participants हैं, like total है. एक students total mean a relationship is called total if all entities of that entity set may be participants in the relationship. A relationship also called partial if some of the entities of that entity set may be participant in the relationship. Suppose a relationship like part exists between supplier and part. The relationship is total if every part is supplied by a supplier. The relationship is partial. It is possible if certain parts are available without a supplier. So you can say this is a relationship set. Next, you can see key constants of the entity relationship model. Like this is the relations you can see in the figure. Like consider works in an employee can works in many department. Like एक डिपार्टमेंट है फार्मेसी का, उसमें डिफरेंट जो एम्प्लॉयज हैं वो काम कर रहे हैं. अ डिपार्टमेंट हैव मैनी एम्प्लॉयज. दिस इज द एग्जांपल ऑफ रिलेशन. डिपार्टमेंट एक है और एम्प्लॉयज बहुत ज्यादा हैं. एंड in contrast each department has at most one manager according to the key constant on the managers. Like you can see in this diagram, employees manages departments. बहुत सारे एम्प्लॉयज मिलके मैनेज कर रहे हैं बहुत सारे डिपार्टमेंट्स को. लाइक इसमें ये डिपार्टमेंट्स नहीं है बल्कि एक डिपार्टमेंट, अगर एक डिपार्टमेंट है तो एक डिपार्टमेंट में बहुत से एम्प्लॉयज काम कर रहे हैं. सो यू कैन सी इन दिस डायग्राम द रिलेशन बिटवीन entities or relation between these employees and departments. One to one, one to many, many to one, and many to many. Students, these are the associations or these are the relations between these entities. These relationships are called binary relationships because two entity types, ये दो से ज्यादा एंटिटीज जब इसमें इन्वॉल्व हो रही हैं तो दिस इज कॉल्ड बाइनरी रिलेशनशिप. एंड 4 टाइप्स ऑफ बाइनरी रिलेशनशिप. वन टू वन रिलेशनशिप. लाइक सबसे पहले यहाँ आप देख सकते हैं 1 to 1. दिस टाइप ऑफ रिलेशनशिप इज यूज्ड व्हेन फॉर ईच इंस्टेंस इन फर्स्ट एंटिटी क्लास देयर इज ओनली वन इंस्टेंस इन द सेकेंड एंटिटी क्लास, एंड फॉर ईच इंस्टेंस इन सेकेंड एंटिटी क्लास देयर इज ओनली वन इंस्टेंस इन द फर्स्ट एंटिटी क्लास. लाइक एग्जाम्पल में आप लिख सकते हैं कि एक एंटिटी जो है वो एक ही डिपार्टमेंट से रिलेट कर रही है. लाइक चेयरमैन रन्स डिपार्टमेंट, लाइक कंट्री हैज प्रेसिडेंट, and another example you can say manager manages branch. Like employee manage department, एक एम्प्लॉय एक डिपार्टमेंट को मैनेज कर रहा है. दिस इज कॉल्ड 1 to 1 रिलेशनशिप. एंड अनदर रिलेशनशिप इज 1 to many रिलेशनशिप. 1 to many रिलेशनशिप is used when for each instance in first entity class, there can be many instances in the second entity class, and for each instance in second entity class there is only one instance in the first entity class. Like you can see example, state has city, city state, and college has department, employer employees employee, one टू many, स्टेट एक है बट उसके अंदर सिटीज बहुत सारी हो सकती हैं, कॉलेज एक है, कॉलेज हैज डिपार्टमेंट्स, कॉलेज में बहुत सारे डिपार्टमेंट हो सकते हैं, दिस इज वन टू मैनी रिलेशनशिप, एम्प्लॉयर एम्प्लॉयज एम्प्लॉई, एक एम्प्लॉयर बहुत सारे एम्प्लॉयज को हायर कर रहा है, दिस इज वन टू मैनी रिलेशनशिप. थर्ड वन इज मैनी टू वन और मैनी टू, जो आपने भी देखा कि मैनी टू वन टू मैनी है, इसी का कॉन्ट्रास्ट इज द मैनी टू वन होगा. यू कैन सी फोर्थ रिलेशनशिप इज मैनी टू मैनी. मैनी टू मैनी मीन्स this type of relationship is used when for each instance in first entity class there can be many instances in the second entity class, and for each instance in second class entity there can be many instances in the first entity class. Example, you can take this from student studies course. Student many student study many courses, this is the example of many to many. Employee learns skill, different employees or many employees learn many skills, this is many to many. And reader reads books, reader many readers, it may be many books, this is the example of many to many relationship. Okay, let's start next slide. Like पार्टिसिपेशन कंस्टेंट्स, इस डायग्राम में जो पार्टिसिपेंट्स आ रहे हैं वो कौन कौन से होंगे? डज एवरी डिपार्टमेंट हैव अ मैनेजर पार्टिसिपेंट्स में? इफ सो दिस इज अ पार्टिसिपेंट कंस्टेंट्स, द पार्टिसिपेशन ऑफ डिपार्टमेंट इन मैनेजेस इज सेड टू बी टोटल. अभी हमने पहले टोटल की बात की है कि टोटल एक्चुअली क्या था. अ रिलेशनशिप इज कॉल्ड टोटल इफ ऑल एंटिटीज ऑफ दैट एंटिटी सेट मे बी पार्टिसिपेंट इन द रिलेशनशिप, दिस इज द टोटल रिलेशनशिप. एंड आई टोल्ड यू व्हाट इज पार्शियल. Again, a relationship is called partial if some of the entities of that entity set may be participant in the relationship. Suppose a relationship manages, you can see in the diagram, manages exist between employees and departments, this is a partial. You can see in the highlighted lines every department ID, DID mean department ID value in departments table must appear in a row of the managers table with a non-null value of. So you can see employees, managers, departments, and this manager since starting date of employment manages, works in, ये मैनेजर काम कर रहा है, दिस इज द एंडिंग एम्प्लॉयड डेट, इसने यहां से लेके यहां तक काम किया, these are the employees, these are the highlighted lines, this is called participations. Next you can see different types of entities in this diagram. Entity, what is entity? You can say entity have a relation, like relation mean a weak entity or a strong entity. Weak entity, you can see in the diagram the highlighted text, or you can see highlighted or double lined. Weak entity can be identified uniquely only by considering the primary key of another. Next coming lectures में आप primary key और overall keys के बारे में lecture देख लेंगे. अभी यहाँ पे primary key is the uniquely identified key of the table. And what is the weak entity? Weak, an entity that can exist only if another entity exists, is known as weak entity. It means that weak entities depend upon the existence of another entity. Like last lecture में हमने देखा था कि parent and network model में parent has a child. Child उस वक्त तक exist नहीं कर सकता जब तक parent मौजूद ना हो. Then child is a weak entity because parent की एंटिटी होगी देन चाइल्ड की एंटिटी क्रिएट हो सकती है. सपोज वी वांट टू स्टोर द डाटा ऑफ अ स्टूडेंट आफ्टर असाइनिंग अ क्लास टू हिम. इट मीन्स दैट द डाटा कैन नॉट बी स्टोर्ड इफ क्लास एंटिटी डज नॉट एग्जिस्ट. अंडरस्टैंड? In order to store the record of the student, we first need to create an entity that represents a class. Here student is a weak entity because it depends upon class entity, and the entity on which the weak entity depends is called owner or identifying owner. A weak entity is represented by double line square like policy or departments dependents. You can see employees, policies, dependents. Owner, look at this slide. Owner entity set and weak entity set must participate in a one-to-many relationship set. One owner, many weak entities. And weak entity set must have total participation in this identifying relationship set. These are the employee is the entity in the rectangle, and the other is attributes. Attributes की भी बात करेंगे हम कि what is an attribute. Let's see next, like a project. ISA is a project of a company, and this is the hierarchy of this database. Like ISA, hourly employees, contact employees, two types of employees hired by ISA, hourly and contract employees. Contract employees has the attribute of contract ID, and hourly employees has the attribute of hourly wages and hourly worked. ISA employees name or S number, like in C++ or other programming languages, attributes are inherited. If we declare A ISA B, every A entity is also considered to be a B entity. You can see in this diagram. Overlap constraints. Can Joy be an hourly employees as well as a contract employees entity? Or covering constraints. Does every employees entity also have to be an hourly employees or contract employees entity? Yes or no? So these are the attributes. Reasons for using this ISA: to add descriptive attributes specific to a subclass and to identify entities that participate in this class. You can see the aggregation between these entities, or aggregation between these between this all over the diagram. What is the aggregation? Aggregation used when we have to model a relationship involving entity set and a relationship set. These are the entities, projects, departments, and they all are have a entity set. You can see student next aggregation allow us to treat a relationship set as an entity set for purpose of participation in other relationship. Aggregation ternary relationship monitors is a distinct relationship with a descriptive attribute. Also can say that each sponsorship is monitored by at most one employee. Aggregation in this diagram you can see, and this is the conceptual design using ERD. Like design choice, you have a choice. Should a concept be modeled as an entity or an attribute? It's up to you. And second, should a concept be modeled as an entity or a relationship? Decision is on your hand. Identify relationships, binary or ternary. And what is aggregation? So constraints in the ER model, a lot of data semantics can and should be captured, but some constraints cannot be captured in ER diagram. I will assign you an assignment after this lecture and post in the Google Classroom, so you can turn in on the ER model. एक scenario, एक project जो कि मैं आपको असाइन करूंगी. यू हैव टू मेक द ईयर डायग्राम ऑफ दिस प्रोजेक्ट. सो नेक्स्ट, एंटिटी वर्सेस एट्रीब्यूट. जैसे अभी हमने एंटिटी और एट्रीब्यूट्स के बारे में देखा कि एंटिटी क्या है, एट्रीब्यूट्स क्या है. तो डायग्राम हर स्लाइड में शो की है. द रेक्टेंगल शेप इज कॉल्ड एंटिटी एंड द ओवल शेप इज कॉल्ड एट्रीब्यूट. सिंपल. Should addresses be an attribute of employees or an entity connected to employees by a relationship? Employee, student, employee is an entity. Employee name, employee address, employee age, employee height, all are the attributes of an entity. And you can say the teacher is an entity, and the teacher name, teacher designation, teacher or teacher date of joining, teacher subject, these all are the attributes of a teacher. Student attributes may have different types like simple attribute, composite attribute, or single value attribute, multi-value attribute. Like entity have different types, so attribute also have a different types. So simple attribute, an attribute that cannot be subdivided into smaller component, is known as simple attribute. It also called atomic attribute. Like a person can have only one gender, so it cannot be subdivided into smaller gender. Either it is male or female. So this is simple attribute. The second type of attribute is composite attribute. An attribute that can be divided into smaller components is called composite attribute. Like employee have an address. तो ये एड्रेस, जैसे फर्स्ट लाइन में आप इसकी एग्जांपल देख रहे हैं, तो एड्रेस स्टूडेंट कैन बी डिवाइडेड इनटू स्मॉलर कंपोनेंट्स. लाइक एड्रेस में हैव स्ट्रीट नंबर, एड्रेस में हैव सिटी नेम, एड्रेस में हैव कंट्री नेम. सो दीज आर डिवाइडेड इनटू स्मॉलर कंपोनेंट्स. इट इज कॉल्ड कंपोजिट एट्रीब्यूट. सो सिंगल वैल्यूड एट्रीब्यूट is another type of attribute. An attribute that may contain single value is called single valued, and an attribute that may contain two or more value is called multi-value attribute. Like single value attribute की example आप ले सकते हैं कि age of a person जो है वो सिंगल वैल्यू हो सकती है. एक किसी भी पर्सन की एज जो है वो मल्टीपल वैल्यूज में नहीं आ सकती. दिस इज द एग्जांपल ऑफ सिंगल वैल्यू एट्रीब्यूट. एंड मल्टी वैल्यू एट्रीब्यूट, यू कैन से अ पर्सन कैन हैव टू और मोर कॉलेज डिग्रीज. लाइक आपने इंटर जो है वो सरगोदा बोर्ड से किया, लाइक आपने बीएस जो है वो यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ एजुकेशन से किया, और एमफिल जो है वो यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ पंजाब से किया. डिफरेंट contain two or more values. A person contain two or more values. This is called multi-value attribute. So multi-value attribute can be represented by double line or oval. I will upload a lecture on the shapes of ER model. Another attribute type, stored attribute. Stored attribute, students, that is stored in a database is called stored attribute. And the derived attributes are the attributes that is not stored in database but derived from another value is called derived attribute. The other value can be stored in the database or obtained in some other way. You can take example like roll number, name, and date of birth of a student can be stored in database. The age of a student can be derived from date of birth. So this is called derived attribute. And in general, student derived attributes are represented in oval shape but in dotted lines. Okay. depends upon the, look at the slide, depends upon the use we want to make of address information and the semantic of the data. If we have several addresses per employee, address must be an entity. I think it will be understand, since attribute cannot be set valued. If the structure, city, street, etc. is important, for example, we want to retrieve employees in a given city, address must be modeled as an entity. Entity versus attribute, आई थिंक ये आपको बहुत अच्छे से क्लियर हो गया होगा, बट इस डायग्राम में आप देख सकते हैं दोबारा से, एम्प्लॉयज आर द एंटिटी, डिपार्टमेंट्स entity, and in oval shapes, all oval shapes are attribute. Works into does not allow an employee to work in a department for 2 or more periods. Similar to the problem of wanting to record several addresses of an employee, we want to record several values of the descriptive attributes for each instance of this relationship. And first ER diagram, okay, if a manager gets a separate discretionary budget for each department. Your assignment will on this or relating to managers. What if a manager gets a discretionary budget that covers all managed departments? Redundancy of the budget which is stored for each debt managed by the managers. Redundancy means, student, duplication of data. D budget mean databases budget. Misleading suggest D budget mean database budget tied to managed department. In you can see in the diagram here model, like what is this? Logical database design, entity sets to table. Simple. ये स्लाइड आपको एक क्यूरी बता रही है, हाउ टू क्रिएट दिस एंटिटी सेट्स टू अ टेबल. Table name employee and attributes or fields name are name, employee of department. Like query is create table employees, table name employees, and in brackets SSN, character mean, data type, and the size of name is 11. Character, the second attribute, name, character mean type, or you can say data type, like text type data type or character data type. In MS Access the type is text, but in SQL this is type of character 20. So limits the size. This is a simple example of logical database design when you deploy in the in a software or a databases. In translating a relationship set to a relation, attributes of the relation must include keys for each participating entity set. A foreign key इंशाल्लाह नेक्स्ट में आपको नेक्स्ट लेक्चर आ जाएगा कीज का. फॉरेन की इज द की दैट इज प्राइमरी की इन अनदर टेबल or a reference key. This set of attributes form a super key for the relation. All descriptive attributes like in this query set. Okay students, these are the relations of key constants of the relations, one to one, one to many. I had discussed earlier many to one and many to many. And आपको इसकी समझ भी बहुत अच्छे से आ गई होगी. इसकी एग्जांपल्स की भी वन बाय वन मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दे के बताया है. डिफरेंट जो क्यूरीज हैं एसक्यूएल के अंदर, क्रिएट टेबल हमने भी पहले देखा था कि इसकी जो क्यूरीज हैं लाइक क्रिएट, सेलेक्ट, select, update, delete are the databases queries. और इसको इंशाल्लाह हम नेक्स्ट जब अप्लाई भी करेंगे तो आप देख सकते हैं कि किस तरह से ये एक मॉडल, दिस इज द लॉजिकल मॉडल, और ये फिजिकल में किस तरह से कन्वर्ट होने जा रहा है। सामने जो डायग्राम है, ईआर डायग्राम जो है, ये एक लॉजिकल मॉडल है। इसको देखकर, दिस इज अ डिजाइन, दिस इज अ मैप, इसको देख के आप इसको कन्वर्ट कर रहे हैं इन अ स्ट्रक्चर्ड क्वेरी लैंग्वेज और अनदर एक्सेस, डेटा बेसिस एक्सेस। This participants create table department manager, other name of DID, department ID, department name, like आपने department manager name का एक टेबल क्रिएट किया और उसमें फिर आपने उसके जो एट्रीब्यूट्स हैं उनको like this ठीक है, और जो आपने ये सबको क्रिएट करके, तो ये इनके एट्रीब्यूट्स और उनकी टाइप्स और उनका साइज यहाँ पे आपको क्लियरली नजर आ रहा होगा। तो स्टूडेंट्स, इसमें आप देख सकते हैं कि वीक एंटिटी, आप यहाँ से वीक एंटिटी को देख सकते हैं कि वीक एंटिटी आपको कहाँ से शो हो रही है, लाइक दिस फॉरेन की। डिपार्टमेंट्स, डिपेंडेंट्स, पॉलिसी, एम्प्लॉइज इज द स्ट्रॉन्ग एंटिटी एंड डिपेंडेंट इज द वीक एंटिटी। दिस इज ISA hierarchy। आपने पहले देखा, अब आपको आई थिंक ज्यादा अच्छे से समझ आ गई होगी। दिस इज द ओवरऑल डायग्राम ऑफ दिस चैप्टर। General approaches, 3 relations, 1 employees. In this diagram, 3 relations are used. Hourly employees and the contract employees and employees. इनके दरमियान आपस में रिलेशन है। Means hourly employees mean every employee is recorded in the employees, and for hourly employees, this employees mean extra info recorded in hourly employees, and hourly employees tuple if referenced employee tuple is deleted. Alternative, just hourly employees and contract employees. These are the hierarchies of these relations. स्टूडेंट्स, अभी इन तमाम टॉपिक्स को पढ़ने के बाद, अभी जैसे मैंने आपको असाइनमेंट का जिक्र किया कि इन तमाम चीज़ों को आपने देखा बहुत अच्छे से। फर्स्ट वन, एंटिटी एंड देयर एट्रीब्यूट्स एंड देयर रिलेशंस एंड देयर टाइप्स ऑफ रिलेशंस, मैनी टाइप्स ऑफ रिलेशंस एंड मैनी टाइप्स ऑफ एट्रीब्यूट्स एंड द टाइप्स ऑफ एंटिटीज। इन तमाम की हायरार्की भी आपने देखी। आई हैव असाइन्ड यू एन असाइनमेंट on a project like management project. You have to prepare an ER diagram for a real estate firm that lists property for sale. These are the key terms for making this project. The firm has number of sales offices in several states. First, you have to select or identify the entities and attributes and the relationship between these entities. So I will summarize this lecture. आज का सारा लेक्चर हमने देखा ER मॉडल पे, what is ER model, what is ER diagrams and why we use these diagrams. Components of ER diagram आपने अच्छे से देखे, relationships, weak entities, attributes, cardinality एंड ER डायग्राम नोटेशंस को आपने देखा। इफेक्टिव ER डायग्राम एज एन असाइनमेंट भी अब आपको मिल चुकी है। आई होप कि आपको ये सारा लेक्चर समझ आ गया होगा। नेक्स्ट लेक्चर इंशाल्लाह। ओके, अल्लाह हाफिज।